Yo, what is going on, guys? Dr. Ethan Turner here with the Fantasy Headliners, and it's time for our Week 10 Injury Update Show. You guys know the drill. Every single week, I pop on here and go through the entire NFL slate and tell you which injuries you need to care about for your fantasy teams. And per the usual, this show is brought to you by our friends over at Fantrax. Make sure you're downloading the Fantrax app and let them know that the Headliners sent you. But let's get into it. Week 10 Injury Update Show. Let's go. All right, guys, you know the drill. We're going to start with a moment of silence. This is where we talk about some players whose season did sadly end this week. First up, we got 49ers cornerback Jason Verrett. He had an Achilles tear in practice this week. Another horrible injury for this guy who's just had his fair share of issues throughout his career. Wishing him the best of luck on his recovery. And then Packers linebacker Rashawn Gary, who was really coming on this year, one of the few bright spots for the Packers this season, had an ACL tear in week 9, was placed on IR, and is done for the year. So let's get some pour one out emojis in the chat for these two guys as their season has ended. And we're going to take a quick moment of silence. All right, moving on to the Week 9 accuracy recap. So this is just a little recap of what I did last week, what I said, what I was right on, what I was wrong on. And I had a pretty solid week last week. 89% on my in-out calls, 88% on the year, still shooting for that 90% by the end of this season. Did have some misses last week, though. Chuba Hubbard was out. Expected him to play. He was ruled out on Friday, though, so hopefully you got him out of your lineups if you did expect him to play like I did. Trey Flowers, Budda Baker, both those guys ended up playing. I did not expect them to. And then Darren Waller, Marquise Goodwin, Jarvis Landry all ended up sitting as well. Was a little bit surprised by those three guys sitting as well. I did tell you guys to start DJ Moore last week. Dealt with really horrible quarterback play to start the game in the first half. Never really got it going with Baker Mayfield in the second half of that game. So he finishes the wide receiver 50. My bad on that call. Deion Jackson, I thought he was going to be startable. He was so bad his coach got fired. So you hate to see that. Doesn't look like he is going to be able to play this week because of injury. I'll talk about it a little bit later. So missed on that one. And for the first time this year, it took 10 weeks, but my prize pick play of the week did not hit for the first time this year. DK Metcalf didn't hit his over. Still finished as a top 20 wide receiver on the week, but just didn't hit the yardage that we were hoping for prize picks. But it wasn't all bad news. I did have some hits last week that I'm proud of. Told you guys to start Josh Palmer with Keenan Allen and Mike Williams out. He finished as the wide receiver 11 and a half PPR. Dicker, the kicker, coming in for the Chargers, finished tied as the 6th best kicker on the week in week 9. Told you guys he was going to be starting. Start Cordero Patterson off of IR. Said he'd be an RB2. Actually finished as the RB7 on the week, so big hit there. Also told you guys to start Kenyon Drake because I did not expect Gus Edwards to play. And if you held out until Monday, you were rewarded with the RB4 on the week in Kenyon Drake. I did say that Jeff Wilson coming in was going to hurt Raheem Mostert immediately. Wilson actually finished ahead of Mostert as the RB10 on the week. So if you took my advice and actually started Jeff Wilson, you're welcome for that. I did not expect him to have that much workload, but I did expect him to hurt Raheem Mostert last week and again this week. Starting Jalen Waddle and Allen Lazard, both those guys ended up as top 8 wide receivers in week 9. Jamal Williams stealing DeAndre Swift's work once again because of that injury. DeAndre Swift is not 100%. Williams did finish ahead of Swift in fantasy, but neither one of those guys had a great week. I said Ramondre Stevenson's going to continue his run as a top 12 running back. He did finish as the RB11 on the week. And then this one, I don't know if I can count this as a hit, but I'm going to throw it in here anyway. I told you guys that I was not going to be surprised if James Mitchell was used more in the pass game for the Lions at the tight end position without TJ Hawkinson. I'm going to count it, though. Even though he only had one more target than Brock Wright, he did have a touchdown. So I will be looking at this situation, hoping James Mitchell continues to build on this role as the pass-catching tight end for the Lions. All right, guys, let's head into the matchups for this week. We got 4 teams on bye: the Bengals, Ravens, Patriots, and Jets. If there's anybody from those teams you want me to talk about, let me know in the comments down below. Not going to spend a whole lot of time on teams on the bye, but heading into Thursday night football, Falcons at the Panthers. Falcons taking another L this week. Losing in the injury battle as well. Cornerback A.J. Terrell still out with a hamstring strain. Panthers didn't really have a whole lot going on from an injury perspective. Chuba Hubbard did return last night, but was not crazy effective. D'Onta Foreman is clearly the starter moving forward in that backfield. So not much to talk about Thursday night football. Two pretty bad teams. The game was at least somewhat entertaining this week, unlike other weeks that we've seen where the Thursday night game is just a total skip fest. So at least they scored some points, and hopefully you started those guys that did manage to score some points there for both those teams. Heading over to the Seahawks at the Bucks. Seahawks not really dealing with any major injuries, so I'm going to skip through past them. Moving on to the Bucks, tight end Cameron Brate dealing with neck strain and a concussion, has been out a few weeks, but was able to practice in full all week. Looks like he is on track to play this week. Have to wonder if rookie tight end Cade Otton can maintain the steady workload that he's had for the last month now that Brate is back, or does Cam Brate step right back in to that kind of tight end 2, high volume, not really a great touchdown scorer tight end option that we're looking for if we aren't starting one of the stud tight ends in the league. Wide receiver Mike Evans dealing with rib and ankle injuries. He's been banged up the last few weeks, but has played through them. Limited in practice all week this week, but I'm not really expecting him to miss any time. Julio Jones dealing with that partial PCL tear. Still getting rest throughout the week. Didn't practice Wednesday. Just going to manage this kind of as the season goes along. He is expected to play, but I'm not really expecting much from a fantasy perspective from Julio Jones. Still not 100% healthy. Wide receiver Russell Gage dealing with a hamstring strain. Gage hasn't practiced yet this week. Does not look like he is going to play either. Reminder, this game is being played in Germany and will start early on Sunday. Luckily, not a whole lot injury-wise to be paying attention to for this game, but just know that if for some reason we get some type of news that somebody is a game-time decision heading into this game, you're going to have to wake up early to find out what happens with that player. Moving on to the Vikings at the Bills. Vikings only got to worry about cornerback Cameron Dantzler, dealing with an ankle sprain, left week 9 with this injury and was described as week to week. Unlikely we see him playing this week, which puts rookie Caleb Evans, got to say that right. It's kind of a tricky name to say. A Caleb rookie on the outside. We'll see how that works against a Bills team that can absolutely kill you on the outside, which should be good news for the Bills pass game, except Josh Allen dealing with a UCL sprain. This is probably the biggest injury news of the week. Played through the injury, but it happened pretty late in the game. Didn't have to do a whole lot after that. But the game reports started circulating afterwards that the team may look to get him healed up before throwing him back into a game this year. UCL is really hard to brace. It's the ligament on the inside of the elbow. So when you throw, it's that one that you put all the stress on. A lot of people know this as the Tommy John ligament that gets repaired if you tear it. Last saw this with a quarterback, actually Ben Roethlisberger tore his and had surgery on it, but it doesn't sound like Josh Allen's injury is as bad as that. So it doesn't look like he's going to have surgery. And we have actually seen this before with Josh Allen. Last time he missed time was back in 2018. Exact same type of injury. And back then it did take him 4 weeks to return. He did return, but he missed 4 weeks. So I think we see him getting back faster this time, just based on what the reports are saying as far as his recovery and how he's looking in practice. But I don't expect him to play this week. Just keep an eye on this one as we head into the weekend, because if he can play, you're obviously starting Josh Allen. The Bills do have a bunch of injuries on the defensive side of the ball as well. Free safety Jordan Poyer's dealing with an elbow injury that's kept him out a few weeks. Linebacker Tremaine Edmonds is dealing with heel and groin injuries. Cornerback Kaiir Elam is dealing with an ankle sprain, and defensive end Greg Russo dealing with an ankle sprain. None of those guys have practiced yet this week. Does not look like any of them are on pace to play. Heading over to the Lions at the Bears. The Lions dealing with a few running injuries at the running back position. Most important, DeAndre Swift dealing with shoulder and ankle sprains that he's been dealing with for most of this season. Continues to log limited practices with this. Clearly still playing through pain from the shoulder and ankle injuries. This guy has looked like a shell of himself since he came back after the bye. Continues to get enough work to justify putting him into your lineups, but just know this guy is more of a flex option right now as opposed to a locked in RB1. Until we see him get that burst back and really start to produce from a fantasy perspective, just know he's a lot more touchdown dependent than he was at the beginning of the year, but still getting enough work. Still think you can start him, and I still think that Jamal Williams is going to get enough run that you can start him as well. Wide receiver Josh Reynolds dealing with a back injury. Picked this up midweek last week, hasn't practiced since. To me, Josh Reynolds seems droppable to me at this time. I just don't think he's going to be able to come back and be any significant fantasy relevant games going forward. So if you need a spot on your bench and you've got Josh Reynolds there, I'm probably dropping him. The Bears, nothing really to talk about, so we're just going to move on along. Heading over to the Jaguars at the Chiefs. Jags tight end Evan Ingram dealing with a back injury. Ingram has been limited this week with this back issue, but doesn't appear to be in any jeopardy of missing the game. Ingram had put together 4 pretty decent weeks, at least for tight end standard, but was an absolute dud last week. So we'll see if he is able to come back and at least be a solid target magnet for a Jags team that really needs pass catchers right now. Just nobody really putting it together outside of Christian Kirk and Travis Etienne. Chiefs wide receiver Mecole Hardman dealing with abdominal soreness. Not really a specific injury here. Just said that he was described by Coach Andy Reid as soreness. So he's dealing with some type of abdominal strain. Not a medical condition that I know of, but concerning because he hasn't practiced yet this week. So if he isn't practicing on Friday, there's a pretty good chance that Mecole Hardman misses. I do think that Kadarius Toney could step into that role now, getting another week of practice under his belt. Heading over to the Browns at the Dolphins. Browns tight end David Njoku has missed a few weeks with the high ankle sprain. Did say at the beginning of this week that he was going to try to return, but the practice reports say otherwise. He has not gotten any work in practice outside of with the training staff. So very unlikely that we see David Njoku return this week, but I'm going to take his confidence at word and say that it is a good sign that he is closer to returning than he was in the last few weeks. Cornerback Denzel Ward was dealing with a concussion. I was starting to get a little worried after a few missed games with this concussion, but it looks like he's practicing in full this week, should be back and ready to return against arguably the best 1-2 wide receiver duo in the NFL right now in Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. So really tough matchup for Denzel Ward coming back from that concussion. And then right tackle Jack Conklin, All-Pro, has a foot injury, played through this injury when it happened, but was downgraded from limited to a DNP on Thursday. Just want to make sure that you guys are aware of this for a team that's really relying heavily on the run game right now. Could be down at the right tackle position. Dolphins, not really dealing with any injuries, playing well. I expect the Dolphins to actually pull out another win this week. Moving over to the Texans at the Giants. The Giants, just one of the big surprises of the NFL. Really just both the New York teams, but I'm just more surprised by the Giants because I'm just not really sure how they're doing it. But the Texans dealing with wide receiver Brandon Cooks. He's got a wrist injury, but I'm just a little skeptical of this injury. I'm not really sure exactly what we got going on here because he had the wrist injury before the trade deadline, but then there was like some tension during the trade deadline, so I'm not sure what's going on there. He did return to practice after missing last week with that reported injury, but again, I'm not 100% sure that something is actually going on with his wrist. I didn't expect him to miss last week, so I guess it sounds like he will play this week, but I'm still going to call him a game time decision because I just don't really know what's going on with this situation. I'm not sure it's 100% injury related, and I just don't think he's going to be great for fantasy coming back against a team that's been surprisingly good on defense. Wide receiver Nico Collins dealing with a groin strain. Has been dealing with this injury, but has been limited in practice all week, so a good sign he's moving in the right direction. I think he's on track to return this week, but I don't really trust any pass catchers in this offense. And then running back Dameon Pierce dealing with chest and shoulder injuries. It's really a shame that Pierce is on the Texans because this dude just absolutely runs his heart out every single time he touches the ball. He's a bit sore after bulldozing the Eagles last week. Ran through the whole defense. I'm not surprised his chest and his shoulder are a little sore after that. He should play. Only guy on the Texans that I'm really thinking about starting for fantasy this week. Giants tight end Daniel Bellinger has an orbital socket fracture. Pretty scary injury when this happened. He got kind of poked in the eye. It broke the orbital socket under his eye. And so unlikely he plays this week, but it is a good sign he can see. His vision is improving, so good things are coming from Daniel Bellinger. He's pretty confident that he will play again this week. Not this week, but this year. He does think he's going to come back at some point this year. Offensive tackle Evan Neal, still dealing with that MCL sprain, missed the team's game in week 8. Doesn't look like he's on track to play this week. Interestingly, Saquon Barkley's lowest rushing output of the season was in the week that Evan Neal missed. I do expect Saquon Barkley to absolutely shred this defense that's giving up a bajillion yards to running backs right now. But if for some reason he doesn't do that this week, I think we can point to this injury to Evan Neal as maybe something that we need to pay more attention to when projecting Saquon Barkley's rushing totals week to week. Heading over to the Saints at the Steelers. Saints running back Mark Ingram dealing with a knee injury. He isn't practicing. Doesn't look like he is likely to play. Cornerback Marshawn Lattimore still has that abdominal injury, not practicing. Doesn't look like he's going to play. Wide receiver Jarvis Landry, one of my misses from last week. He's got the ankle sprain. He's been limited again this week, but he's a game time decision until we see any type of sign that he's actually going to play. He's been limited for multiple weeks now. I keep thinking he's going to play and then he doesn't. So we're just going to call it a game time decision because that's what it is. And then the Saints actually have a lot of issues on the offensive line right now. The team is hoping that starting offensive tackle Trevor Penning is going to come back from IR this week, but they have 2 other linemen that are dealing with injuries and are not practicing. Center Eric McCoy and guard, I'm going to say this wrong, but Andres Pete. I'm predicting that the Steelers defense puts a ton of pressure on the offense in this game, and I could see the Saints struggling to get things going through the air. So Chris Olave getting downgraded a little bit due to this O-line being hurt. Moving on to the Steelers, kicker Chris Boswell dealing with a groin strain was placed on IR. Will miss the next 4 games because of this. They did sign kicker Matthew Wright off the Chiefs practice squad. Wright actually did play for the Steelers before back in 2020. He appeared in 3 games, made all 7 extra points and 4 field goals that he attempted. I think he's a suitable kicking streamer if you need one. You're going to have him for a few weeks here with Chris Boswell on IR. And then just keeping an eye on linebacker TJ Watt, dealing with that pec strain, was designated to return last week, but ultimately missed the game. Game time decision again this week, but if he returns, he is going to get just an absolute incredible matchup against that banged up offensive line for the Saints. All right, guys, heading on over to the Broncos at the Titans. Broncos wide receiver KJ Hamler dealing with a hamstring strain was downgraded on Thursday, not expecting him to play. He has a history of hamstring strains in the past. Sad to see him dealing with another one here. Linebacker Baron Browning dealing with a hip injury. Browning is expected to miss significant time with this injury, is not expected to play this week. Remember back in week 8 when Travis Etienne absolutely destroyed this Broncos defense for 156 yards on the ground? Yeah, how do you think Derrick Henry's going to do? Henry is my Prize Pick play of the week. Head on over to Prize Pick, use the code HEADLINERS for $100 first deposit match, and slam the over on Derrick Henry. Huge rushing total here, 105.5 yards. I'm going to say he's going to 120, 140. I think Derrick Henry is going to absolutely kill this Broncos defense. And this line actually moved on me while I was recording this. Originally, it was 97.5, and they bumped it all the way up to 105.5. I think there's a good chance that by Sunday, this is at like 110 to 115. So make sure you get on the over when it's only at 105.5 yards right now. Moving over to the Titans, they got wide receiver Treylon Burks coming back from turf toe injury. He was designated to return this week and is slated to actually play on Sunday. Not a great option for fantasy. This team just does not throw the ball enough, but it is worth knowing that he is coming back, and he has one of the better separations in the league in terms of yards per separation per route run. This guy is just getting tons of separation. They just don't throw the ball enough for it to really turn into much. But we want to see Treylon Burks healthy and playing well so that we can know what he is moving forward. Quarterback Ryan Tannehill dealing with an ankle sprain. Has sat the last 2 weeks, and his job of handing the ball off to Derrick Henry could be in jeopardy, except that it's really not that hard for Ryan Tannehill to do that. And Malik Willis really didn't show enough to take over the starting job from Ryan Tannehill. I expect him to play and start this week as he comes back. And then the Titans defense, one of the most injured squads in all of the league right now. They have multiple defensive starters that haven't practiced at all this week due to injury. You got linebackers Zach Cunningham and Bud Dupree, safety Amani Hooker, defensive end Jeffrey Simmons, defensive tackle Tier Tart, and then cornerbacks Josh Thompson and Christian Fulton, all missing time. Some speculation that they could go small town high school and have the offensive players play on defense as well. I'm just joking. They're not actually going to do that. But just know this Titans defense is absolutely banged up right now. Heading over to the Colts at the Raiders. Colts running back Jonathan Taylor dealing with that ankle sprain, missed last week. Did get a full practice in on Thursday. Sounds like he's going to be back. Still one of the best pure runners in football. And I think the Colts will use him because running back Deion Jackson, his backup, has a knee sprain, hasn't practiced, doesn't look like he's going to play. And they traded Nyheim Hines. So Jonathan Taylor's really all that's left for the Colts. Quarterback Matt Ryan dealing with that AC sprain. Matt Ryan got his first full practice in after 2 weeks off with this injury. He was reportedly downgraded, but I just have to wonder if now that he is healthy, the team doesn't get the urge to put him back in as the starter. He cannot be worse than Sam Ehlinger, and if they continue to go with Sam Ehlinger, the Colts are openly admitting that they are tanking for a quarterback, and I'll be honest, not the worst idea that I have seen a team try to implement, but it's getting pretty obvious if Matt Ryan is not hurt and they're still sitting him that they are trying to tank for a quarterback because Sam Ehlinger has been terrible. Tight end Mo Alley-Cat Cox dealing with an ankle sprain, hasn't practiced, doesn't look like he's going to play. And then his backup, tight end Jelani Woods, also dealing with a shoulder sprain, doesn't appear that he's going to play either. Both tight ends down. I'm going to predict, and I know this is hard to predict because if they go with Sam Ehlinger, I just don't know how they're going to score touchdowns. But I'm going to go with a touchdown for Michael Pittman this week with both of the big body tight ends out. Raiders dealing with plenty of injuries on the offensive side. Tight end Darren Waller dealing with that hamstring strain. He has not been able to shake it, hasn't been able to shake it. It got worse. Reportedly had a setback. Now he's going to IR. He's going to be out for 4 weeks. And I'll be honest, I'm a little thankful for this because I miss on him every single week that he is hurt. So now I know he's just not going to play for the next 4 weeks. And then Hunter Renfrow dealing with hamstring and rib injuries, also placed on IR. I just think that with these two injuries, you can't help but think that Davante Adams could be the wide receiver one by the end of this year with all the targets that he's going to be getting in this offense. Mac Hollins jumping back up into flex consideration for me week to week. And from a PPR perspective, I think he is a safe play as kind of a wide receiver 3-4 in that range. The Raiders really banged up on offense. Hate to see that they just have no weapons except for Davante Adams right now. Heading over to the Cowboys at the Packers. Cowboys running back Ezekiel Elliott dealing with that knee sprain should have lost his job with the way that Tony Pollard played in Week 8, but the team has about 18 million reasons to keep him and keep letting him start and play and take touches from Tony Pollard. I don't hate the matchup, but I think Pollard's still going to maintain the bulk of the work in this backfield as they kind of ramp Ezekiel Elliott up. Moving over to the Packers, running back Aaron Jones dealing with an ankle sprain was seen in a walking boot on Sunday after the game, but that's pretty standard precaution for ankle injuries now. He's been limited all week and could cede some of the running back touches to A.J. Dillon. I don't think that Aaron Jones is more than like a low-end RB2 this week in PPR leagues, and I'm probably shying away from him in standard leagues. I just don't think that he's going to get the work that he normally does. Wide receiver Romeo Dubs, however you want to say it, has a high ankle sprain. He went down early in the game with this high ankle sprain and is expected to miss about 4 to 6 weeks. He's probably droppable in redraft leagues for me now. I just don't see how he comes back from this and produces from a fantasy perspective. I am still targeting Allen Lazard, if I need wide receiver help. I think that he's probably the cheapest wide receiver 2 that you can get in the league right now for fantasy. And then the Packers defense, they're pretty beat up right now. We've got linebacker Chris Barnes and Devondre Campbell both expected to miss this week. And then cornerback Eric Stokes also unlikely to play. I do think that Dak Prescott is going to have a pretty good chance of being a quarterback one this week, and I'd like to see it because he's been coming back from that thumb injury. He's put together okay games, but I'd like to see a really nice week for Dak Prescott. Moving over to the Cardinals at the Rams. Cardinals quarterback Kyler Murray dealing with a hamstring strain. Didn't practice on Wednesday. Did get limited work in on Thursday. He's on track to play, but I do worry this is going to limit his rushing upside a little bit. And then safety Budda Baker, one of my misses from last week, dealing with an ankle sprain now, new injury. Managed to play, even though I didn't project him to last week, but picked up this injury and is expected to sideline him multiple weeks. So Budda Baker unlikely to play in this game. Rams quarterback Matthew Stafford dealing with a concussion. No reports of a head injury prior to this practice. It kind of showed up on Tuesday. Does have me concerned. He has not practiced, and I don't think people are talking enough about this injury to Matthew Stafford. What are we doing here, people? The guy has not practiced with a concussion for 2 straight days. Most of the time, they do not play if they don't practice on Thursday with a concussion. So highly likely that Matthew Stafford misses this week. Keep an eye on it. Have a backup plan if you do decide you're going to roll with Matthew Stafford. Just know that we are waiting for him to get cleared from this concussion. Moving into Sunday Night Football, we got Chargers at the 49ers. Chargers wide receiver Keenan Allen is dealing with that hamstring strain. We all know about this when I talk about it every single week. Allen said he's not playing until he's 100%, and based on the fact that he hasn't practiced yet, I'm going to say it's not this week that we see him. I also don't think we see Mike Williams coming back from his high ankle sprain, dealing with just multiple injuries at the wide receiver spot. Tougher matchup for Josh Palmer this week, but I still think he's a really nice wide receiver 3, especially in PPR leagues based on the volume that he's going to get. And then kicker Dustin Hopkins dealing with that hamstring strain, didn't practice Wednesday or Thursday. It's time for Dicker the kicker to come back again and be a solid kicker option for you this week. 49ers dealing with defensive lineman Eric Armstead. He's been hurt all year. Foot and ankle injuries, hasn't practiced in over a month, doesn't appear close to playing, but wide receiver Deebo Samuel is close to playing. He was dealing with that hamstring strain prior to their bye. As expected, he sat the game before the bye. Now he is ready to return. He's gotten a full work in all week in practice and avoided any major setbacks. He's startable against this Chargers secondary really, really bad after they lost J.C. Jackson for the season. I think that Deebo Samuel comes back and has a pretty nice game. Last up, we got Monday Night Football. Commanders at the Eagles. Commanders running back J.D. McKissick dealing with that neck injury, has been seeking multiple opinions on this neck, is not practicing, doesn't look like he's going to play. Wide receiver Jahan Dotson dealing with the hamstring strain. He was scoring touchdowns all over the place before he picked up this hamstring injury, has missed good chunks of the season now. Unlikely he plays this week, but getting some limited practice time in. Good to see he is moving in the right direction. I think he's a game time decision, but I still don't expect him to play. And then the Eagles, they are one of the healthiest teams in the league. Don't really have anybody to talk about for the Eagles, and I expect them to continue winning. So that's all I have for the injury show this week. All right, guys, Week 10 injury update show in the books. Is there anybody I missed? Let me know in the comments down below. And hey, while you're there, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you're not missing any of this injury goodness each and every week of the NFL season and throughout the NFL offseason. You don't want to miss these videos, so make sure you turn on notifications for the fantasy headliners. I want to thank our sponsors, Prize Picks, Fantrax, and Manscaped. Make sure you head on over to Manscaped, get yourself something a little nice, 20% off and free shipping at Manscaped when you use the code headliners. But that's all I got for you guys. Week 10 injury show in the books. The doc is out.